This is becoming a pain in the ass to get the microphone working. I may be talking to myself. I'm not even opening up a chat window because I just can't chat and do this at the same time. I've tried, it just doesn't work. I start getting bombarded with questions that are unrelated to the video, and then I just end up just saying the hell with it. So, no chat. Y'all can chat amongst yourselves, but no chat from me. I do good enough to stay on topic without distractions. So, somewhere is a picture I just had before I reset the computer. So now I don't see it. I thought I copied it onto the desktop, but I guess I did not. There it is in that folder. Alright, so what we got is a picture of wood. And before you make anything in Blender, before you make any texture, any 3D object, you need to make sure your texture is power of 2. See, it's 2048 by 4096. Power of 2 is anything like 248, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, 512, 10, 24, 20, 48, 49, 6, 81, 92, 16, 384 by any of those numbers. That's power of 2. That ensures that the thing will work in BeamNG. You won't have any problems with it making a texture if it's power of 2. If it's not power of 2, well, just say this was some crazy resolution. Let's just make it a crazy resolution, like say 2113 or something shit by something. What I'd basically do is I'd just crop the image. Say this would be 1 to 2. You know, I would just recrop it. And flatten the image. All these unnecessary steps. Well, this was already cropped to the right aspect ratio, but you get my idea. You would crop it to something that you could say 2048 by 4096, or 1024 by 1024, or 2048 by 2048, 256 by 1024, whatever. Just as so long, you know, you don't want to get in a situation where you're trying to scale your object and you get like, you know, sometimes you put like 2048 and then the bottom number will be like 4097. You know, it's like that ain't gonna work. So you need it to be power of 2 before you even start in Blender. So now we'll load Blender and we're gonna make basically a piece of wood. Like in the first video that got 8,000 views. Well, it's done shown its age. It's been a long time since I have made anything like that. Not something basic and simple in Blender. So we're going to open up this image here. This project here. Which is basically I deleted all the stuff so that I can just hit the start button and you can see what keys I'm pressing for the most part. It doesn't show you everything, but it shows you most of the things down there. So what I do is I import in, if I'm going to make something for the game, I'll import in this old model here. This is to scale, so I know when I'm making things to stick to this, to use this for reference. So there is a measuring tape here. You know, I don't like to have to fool with going through here and changing it to American metric. Off metrics to standard every time I make something. So this is easier for me to just look at this. Like that is a better representation than what it'd take me to figure out what that is in feet. But that's your preference. We're gonna make a mesh cube. We're gonna scale it to roughly resemble a piece of wood. Alright, now I got an idea. The size of this wood, I don't need that anymore. I'm going to set the thing's origin to the 3D cursor, and then I'm just going to set origin, geometry to origin. That way it's nice and centered. So when it spawns, it should be centered to where you're spawning it, not 500 feet off into the distance. Now we're going to give it a texture. Well, it doesn't matter what you call it. Just call it something that's not already being used. I don't know. Wood demo. I don't know. Now we did scale this thing, so you'll want to go apply all transforms. You'll see why in a minute. We're going to get a base color. We're going to select that image that I was just showing you all a minute ago. So I should have saved it to the desktop, shouldn't I? Oh, it's in that folder. Where is it? Now when you go up to here to see your viewport shading, you'll see your texture is all wrong everywhere. It's very, very rare it'll ever fit just the way it's supposed to. So that's why we go into edit mode and we'll select by face select, which is, these are the faces here. You select them with this. Now the reason we applied all transforms a minute ago is because this object is no longer a perfect square box. We stretched it and whatnot. So when we go to UV editing, which is where you get your textures fixed, some genius at Blender thought, well, if you're working on these decal or these textures, then you don't need to see what you're actually doing. So they made it switch back to solid shade view for whatever reason. Hell, I don't know. Hold down Z on your keyboard and go to material preview so you can see what you're doing over here. I still don't know why they did that, but it's just an annoying little thing you have to do every time you do this setting up your decals. Now when you go to UV and you unwrap this, you see that this box unwrapped to this correct, basically this shape is that shape. If you didn't apply all transforms when you unwrap the UVs, it'll retain whatever the original object was when you started, which is a simple box. So this is more ideal because it puts you in the ballpark. Now you don't have to apply all transforms. You can manually move all these things, but at least this gets you close enough to where you should be as far as getting the texture lined up. Now I got this piece of this image because it's a lot of different pictures, or a few different pictures of wood. There's the only one thing that looks really fake is when you got like the same thing repeating itself over and over and over, like many times over. Alright, see now you get this side, we unwrap. You're like, well, can I just unwrap everything at one time? No, you don't want to do that. If you do that, then you're going to be having things on top of one another, and it's just going to aggravate you, trying to figure out which one's which. See, I'm hitting A to select all, and then I'm hitting S to scale. I'm just finding these different little places to move these around. I'll do this with all the sides. See, for whatever reason, that one's down there. So one thing you can do when you rotate, you can hold control down, and that'll lock it at 5-degree increment turns. So it's easier to get it where you want it. think that's it. This piece of lumber there. Oh, look at that. Done got sloppy. You can just roll your mouse wheel to get closer for more precise lining up of things. I think that's good enough. Now I'm going to hit this layout button. That's going to take me back to object mode, back out to here. But you got to know, you got object mode, edit mode. These are the main ones that you'll probably be messing with in Blender. Now this right here should, if you export it to the game, since it's a power of 2 resolution, it should make the texture for you. Should. Not doing anything else to it, except we're just calling it a wood. I'll export it to, I say small grid, as a collider, whatever. Levels, art, or small grid. Now I prefer to put all my stuff I make in its own folder. That makes moving it a lot easier if you want to move it from level to level. So let's call this wood, and you can name it. Don't matter what you name the DAE. Actually it does. That's probably what it's looking for when you pick it in the asset browser. I get confused. I make different things, and some things are a little different than other things. Let's load up small grid and let's look and see if we got a piece of wood with the texture made already. I hit F11 to go into your world editor, and you should be able to just pull up the asset browser and find that folder you created, and you should be able to drag this thing into here. And you're like, well, it's got a texture on it, but for some reason it looks like it's inside out. Why is this? Well, somebody forgot to check the normals. Normals are basically what the surface that's facing, like the surface that you touch, basically. The inside would be the reverse of the normals, which if you have an object with the normals reversed and you drive onto it, it's going to eat the car. See, if you go up to these two balls here and you hit this little tab and you say face orientation, it'll show you if the faces are red or if they're blue. These are red, this is not right. How did this happen? Probably when I was scaling the object, I may have went in reverse like that, where you basically make it a negative, you know what I mean, where it goes to infinity and then it restarts, you know what I'm saying? That's probably what I did. But you can always just hit A to select all. You may not have all the faces, may not be red. You may want to manually select them all, or select the ones that you need to. Go to mesh, normals, flip. However, we export this, and it should be fine. There we go. Now, collisions. If you run into it now, you're going to go through it. The easiest way to make a collision for a simple geometry is just go into the inspector with the item selected. Turn collision type here to visible mesh final. Don't use this visible mesh, that takes too much resources. For some reason, it's more performance demanding, or this is the one that you should use. And then if you rebuild collisions up here, you should be able to drive into it. Now, I don't prefer to use this method. I prefer to make my own collision meshes. So what I'll do, I'll turn this off now. I will say add empty plane axis. What this is, it's like a folder. It just made a new folder basically. See, you got scene collection. You have to think of it like this. This is kind of one way you can think of it. Think of the folder here, new folder, scene collection. Inside of that folder, you got another folder called collection. And what we're doing basically is we are making another folder called base 00, and in that folder we're making another folder called start 01. And in start 01 is where this piece of wood we made will go, and its collision mesh. So that's kind of give you an idea of what it is exactly that you're doing when you are in Blender and you make these little folders here. That's, I don't know why they're called what they're called, but it's just what they're called. So we call this one base 00, and we'll make another one, and we'll call this one start 01. Now, just like you move anything on your desktop with your left mouse button and dragging, you'll hold shift and you'll drag start and you'll drop it into base. Then you'll grab this piece of wood and you'll do the same thing with it so that it's in start. Now, the easiest way to make a collision mesh for this is to just duplicate the object and rename it COLMESH-1. That's a proper collision mesh. So these kind of collision meshes, when you load your level, they'll automatically have all the things set. And unlike the other way, you don't have to worry about always wondering, did I set the collision mesh to visible mesh final? It's really annoying when you make a lot of things and you're duplicating a lot of things and you're like, oh crap, I forgot to set the collision mesh. So this makes it a lot easier. If we export this into the level, I'll just call this wood 2. Oh, since all this is going, this ain't a select time where I'm sending 1 or 2 things over. I won't be selecting selection only. And I always let it just copy the texture into there, even if it's already in there. Doesn't hurt anything. Because once I start removing things, if you got your game running, you'll want to right click on the folder and say refresh assets to get it to update the assets. So this is the piece of wood that we just made here. It's got its own collision mesh, but you still have to rebuild collisions or do all your work, reload your level, and it'll rebuild them for you. You don't have to worry about changing this over here. So if we move the car to here, that's not here. I don't know where that is. Here is here, not there. If you've got your game paused and you're moving your car around, this will be where if you hit Shift R, where it'll reset to. Oh, something else. This may to be something some of y'all have experienced when you're trying to move a car around in here and you're like, why is it moving so damn fast? It's hard to put something more. If this happens to you, what you need to do is hit Shift C so that you are in like the free camera. If you're in orbit mode when you move an object in the world editor, it's going to move erratically like at the speed of light across the map. But if you are like this and you're moving it, it does not do that. That was something that they do not tell you that they should tell you, kind of thing. Now, scaling things, I just made a video on this. One thing you have an option of doing is in the window you got ground model debug. This can show you the collision meshes for things. So if you scale something and your collision mesh is not scaling with it, then your origin is not set to the 3D cursor at 0, 0, 0. I may not have posted the video, I'm pretty sure that I did. But basically that's when you got an object that's not set to 0. See, 0, 0, 0 is where the objects Z, Y, and X all come together at 0. Now you can move your 3D cursor by holding Shift and right clicking, and one reason you may want to do this is if you want to set the origin to it so that it'll hinge there, for example. But if you're going to scale anything in the game, or if you're making a mod, then you'll want to set the origin to the 3D cursor. But you'll want to set the 3D cursor to 0, 0, 0. So you'll go over here to View, and you'll change this to 0, 0, 0. So that the object is there. If it's not there, and you scale your object in the game, what will happen is the object will scale, but the collision mesh will be in the wrong place. Now, that was something that took me a while to figure out. But now it's easy to just copy this thing. Once you made one, you can use the keys on the keyboard, 1, 2 to rotate, 1 to move, 2 to rotate, 3 to scale. You can easily just hold Shift down and move this wood and rotate. Basically make you a little ramp. And just remember, you got to rebuild the collisions. You can select them all and duplicate them. Once you get a few of them made, you know, it doesn't take long to make something. Now, these are all repeating textures. That's why I like using different things, so that, or having the option to have different this image only had like a couple pieces of wood that I used. So there's not too many ways you can rotate it around and make it look like it's not the same piece of wood. That's just more of an artistic preference. But if you want things to look unique and not all the same, and you know, vary your things around, you can make one rock look like 20 different rocks just by the way you rotate it. You know, what you got in the ground, what's not in the ground, what's visible. It takes a little more time to do this, but it makes it look a little more realistic. Yeah, that's a little more varied, and it doesn't look such, and it's also imperfect, which is what real life is, imperfect. Very rare does anything in real life perfect. There's always going to be something off somewhere that makes it look a little uneven or a little crooked, just a bit, especially wood. You know, wood, as it gets old, little nails and stuff kind of give way, and they kind of start buckling and looking like, they may be once they were smooth, but not anymore. Oh yeah, by default, anisotropic filtering is not on when it makes your textures. If you want to turn that on, if you want to see a better texture. Also, all these other maps, it doesn't matter what you do in Blender, the only one that's copying over is the color map. So if you were to spend countless hours in Blender, setting all these different things up for all these different, this is all stuff related. This is all like Blender. This isn't carrying over into the game. Doesn't matter what you do in here. This isn't going. The only thing that's going is that one image. That's the base color. That's it. Now you can make many more maps, but they're not coming from Blender. Well, I mean, you could bake textures in Blender, but my point is when you export from Blender, all of them aren't coming with it, just that one. That'd be nice if the game used real ray tracing. But maybe one day. So I think you kind of get the idea. And just rebuild your collisions. I'll get something that can crawl. Did I just... That's what I wanted to happen. So that's basically basic making basic things in Blender. For Beam, which these are scaled too large, but I hope this helps some people understand a little more about making basic things in Blender for Beam. I mean, you can make a lot of things in Blender. I mean, this is just a simple piece of wood. I mean, you can imagine if you spend the time to actually make something, really cool, you know. Now, if you want something smoother, then you'd have to basically, when you make something like this, increase the segments and the rings. Basically, it's like makes it more polygons, but makes it a lot smoother. So remember, if you make something like this, remember where your face orientation is. Say this is inside out. So if you wanted to be inside this and drive on it, you'd have to flip the normals. I added the damn texture to the collision mesh and not the actual object. I thought that was bigger than that. Oops. Forget it's a collision mesh too. Need to scale them both. Now, remember what I said about the normals. So this is what reverse normals. Not only reverse normals textures dark, but they'll eat the car. Or in this case, went through the thing